Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. All right. I'm Patrice Martin. I'm the co-lead and creative director of IDEO.org, a nonprofit that was launched from IDEO to focus specifically on bringing innovation to the challenges of poverty. And recently, we've had the opportunity to dive into the critical issue of the opportunity divide, essentially how we deal with this problem that young people are being left out of America's workforce more and more. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Jay Banfield, the CEO and Director of Europe Bay Area. We have Daniel Lurie, the CEO and founder of Tipping Point Community. And we have Linda Kornahrens, the Executive Director of Strategic Re-Engineering Services from JPMorgan Chase. So to start this conversation off, I'd love to just dive into the heart of the issue. And Linda, hear from you from an employer perspective. There's a lot of conversation around the skills gap and the fact that employers have a hard time finding the skills that are so critical to today's employment, but they are missing from the youth that are emerging from the education system. Can you comment on how you experience this?
Well, I would say that I think from JPMorgan's perspective, we don't have necessarily a big gap in any one specific skill as of today. I think what we are really focused on is the strategy on how we prepare for the future. So as everyone knows, technology changes at a very fast rate. We've been hearing it all day. But how do we know what's the next thing that we're going to need? Some of the things we've been thinking about around data analytics skills, mobile and digital skills are going to be very, very key for our business. So I think it's understanding how do we use the nonprofits for that, how do we use the universities and the colleges, and what other talent pools can we actually go to prepare for what the future brings.
And can you tell us a little bit about some of the things you are doing?
One of the things that we have started, it's very, very early days, is an initiative we're calling 1 Million IT Jobs. Where we're looking at and working with some other firms, not just Wall Street firms, but all different types of companies, and what their demand is going to be over the next 3 to 5 years. At that point, when we get that sort of understanding of what they're looking for, to actually understand how we can bring those talents together or how we can bring those companies together to build almost a training facility so that we are preparing and giving them the skills that the people need, whether they be from the universities or the nonprofits or any other organization. And then this way it becomes a talent pool for all the firms that are actually participating.
Great. Daniel, next question for you. In your experience, or where you sit in Silicon Valley representing Tipping Point Community and looking at the network of organizations you touch with a focus on eliminating poverty, where do you see the skills gap fit in there?
Tipping Point we have 4 portfolio areas: housing, education, employment, and wellness. But if you're talking about a skills gap, I don't care how smart you are, you need to graduate from high school at least. I know there's a lot of talk these days about skipping college and starting your own thing, but we have dropout rates reaching 65% in places like East Palo Alto. We have 40,000 San Jose public school students who are not reading at grade level. These are not numbers that are sustainable for the companies here in Silicon Valley or up in San Francisco. So Tipping Point has a heavy focus, and we have a lot of our dollars going towards great programs that go into traditional public schools. We also support a number of charter management organizations alongside of the great organizations like Year Up. So education is absolutely essential, and that's where we would start.
So that's a good segue for you, Jay. Can you talk a bit about what's happening at Year Up to address this?
Sure. Well, I was thinking that if we designed this better, that I'd be sitting in the middle, because I think it would be symbolic of what we see at Year Up and the issue that we see is that we talked to Linda and we talked to a JPMorgan, and we partner with more than 250 companies across the country. And we hear over and over again that there is this skills gap that exists, both on a technical side, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about some of the softer skills. I'm not sure what the number is exactly today, but it was about 3.5 million open jobs in our country right now. At the same time, Daniel and Tipping Point advocate for millions of young adults in our communities who are disconnected from the economic mainstream, with limited access to education, the workforce, and the networks we all use to build careers. And as we sit at Year Up, we find that particularly frustrating. You think about the 6.7 million young adults throughout our country, more than 70,000 in the Bay Area alone, who have limited access to a career and really no clear path out of poverty. And by the same token, we've got millions of jobs that are open, and companies are struggling to find talent, and they're longing to find talent. And Europe has tried to be in that middle space to broker that relationship between the young adults and our corporate partners.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit more about what exactly is happening at a program level? Because we've had the chance to work together recently, and it's an amazing program that I think you've had very high success rates in placing young people in corporations, and it would be great to let the audience here know a little bit more about that.
I'm happy to do that. In the role as a broker, we will talk with our corporate partners, talk to a JPMorgan, Chase, and say, what are the skills that you're looking for? What is it that you need today? What are you going to need in 6 months' time? We then train our young adults 60% of their time in hard technical skills. We partner with a community college, City College in San Francisco, Foothill College, when we open here in Silicon Valley next year. And students are spending that time with hard marketable IT skills. The other 40% of the time is split evenly between business communications, professional skills, the soft skills that really I think our corporate partners are looking for. Clearly there's a skills gap that exists in technology. There's no debate. Everyone in this room can agree there's a STEM problem that exists. But people are also looking for motivated, talented young people. And I think about the theme of this conference in innovation. We need to be thinking innovatively in two different ways. One is, how do we think about talent in a different way? How do we look within our communities to find talent to solve this gap? And how is it that we then create a more efficient marketplace for information? So how does the educational system or workforce development providers understand what's happening from the corporate perspective? So we are trying to listen to the market, what those skills are, train the students, and as Daniel knows, he's been on site a number of times, we have set really high expectations for our young adults. I think we as a society tend to set expectations low for young people, and then we're surprised when they live down to them. And we at Europe say we're going to set expectations high, and we're going to hold you up, and we're going to hold you to those high standards because we believe in you. So you might come to our site and you see us dressed like this. We realize that's not necessary for all of the partners here in technology, but students then earn their success. They earn an internship after 6 months of studying, a 6-month internship with a leading company in the country, and then they go on to careers, and our success rate's been 87% employment with an average salary of $34,000 a year.
Jay is always dressed like this, always. It's amazing.
Our team from IDEO.org was all of a sudden wearing really nice clothes and obsessed with being on time when they were working with Year Up. So it had an effect on our culture too. Linda, I would love to hear from you around Jay's comments around soft skills and what JPMorgan is doing to recruit for soft skills, and then how that gets integrated into your culture.
Some of the soft skills I think we are lacking today is our ability of our technologists to actually translate technology for our business. Technology adds a huge amount of value to the business. I think everybody knows that, but we have to do, I think, a better job of actually explaining that to our clients and our customers. And how can we enable and add value every single day? We do it. We need to get better at explaining that. The other half of that, I think, is the relationship with our customers. That is priority one with us here at JPMorgan, and we want to make sure that the people we put in front of those customers have the skills that are needed to make sure we keep those customers. So I think the training that Europe provides its interns as part of the first 6 months of the program are key. We have launched, I believe it was last year, we launched a teller program with the Europe interns where we said, where can there be a niche within the firm where the young adults could actually find a job and then also have a career path, which is very, very important to us. It's not just about finding a job. It's about what they're going to do with that and how they're going to take it forward. When we started the teller program, we started with 10, and I believe it was, you're going to correct me here, but I think it's 3 cities. We're now at over 20 in 6 cities. And one of the things that's impressed me most of all about the students themselves is the enthusiasm, but also the awe that they actually accept the fact that they are the front line to our customers and that we entrust that to them. And I think that they take that and they show it to our customers, which in turn makes our business better. So that's one thing that I've always been very, very impressed with. And I think the skills that you are training on for the first 6 months, key. It's the same when we take an intern over the summer from a university. They're learning what it's like to work at JPMorgan Chase, and that's just going to benefit them later on.
So Daniel, this is a fuzzy subject. Like, how do we get soft skills to young people, and what is the effect that has on poverty? And like when we think about Silicon Valley, and it's a place that's now pretty connotated with wealth, where do you see soft skills in this issue?
Well, let me first just go back to one thing about poverty in the Bay Area. I was just at a lunch meeting, and I told this person this statistic that, first off, we have 600,000 people who are living below the federal poverty line right here in the Bay Area, right here in our own backyard. But that's $22,000 a year for a family of 4. So $22,000 a year, we all know that that's not, you can't get by as an individual. So we look at the self-sufficiency line. And this is the line that usually blows people away, is 1.3 million people too poor to meet their basic needs right here in the home of Google and Facebook and eBay and I just keep going on and on and on. And so I just hope everybody kind of takes a moment. We often talk about the issues of poverty globally, which is understandable. Your dollar can go a lot further abroad. I understand that. The only people that are going to take care of the people living in need here in the Bay Area are the people here in this room, and the leaders of these great companies. We need them to step up and do more here in our own backyard, because I can tell you, no one is looking out for East Palo Alto or Redwood City back in New York. Soft skills. You walk into Jay's Europe offices, and I've been with him when the kids are on their first week, and they'll walk by us and they'll be looking down, and Jay will try to lift their head so they look him in the eye. And I'll come in 2 weeks later. Mr. Lurie, how are you? Mr. Lurie, how are you? It's simple things, but people have not taken the time to care about them enough to teach them what many of us were taught growing up. And the little things are what matter often in the business world, and that's why we're so proud to invest in an organization like Europe.
So I guess this is a question for all of you. Where do we want the American workforce to be going? And there's been a lot of talk about apprenticeship, or perhaps the return of apprenticeship, as this may be the disruptor that brings us back to the American dream, where any person can, be successful and find their way in our country. Do you think this is the answer, or is it something else?
I can take a first stab at that. I think kind of tied to the soft skill discussion in my mind is that companies are looking for technical skills, and if you sit and talk to any of our partners, what are you going to need in 5 years? The answer is, well, I'm not really sure. What I need is someone who understands how to learn, someone who's motivated, someone who really wants to figure it out, because when we arrive at 5 years from now, I want to be able to put that person in that position. And so I think that comes in lots of different ways, and I think part of that is through an apprenticeship model, where young people, dislocated workers, have an opportunity to go into an environment and learn a new skill. Because, let's be honest, we struggle, and our economy struggles, and we're not going to recover at the pace we want to unless we engage everyone and get everyone contributing the way that they deserve to contribute in our economy. And so I think an apprenticeship model certainly plays a big role in that. I also think there is a great opportunity to streamline and to make the communications between our educational systems and our corporate partners and in the private sector much more efficient. And that's really, I think, a bargain on both sides. I think that's companies saying that we're going to create space for people to learn real skills that will allow them to, take those skills and build on them. And I think that requires educational system to be more nimble and responsive, which to date it really hasn't been.
Linda, can I get your reaction?
Yeah, I guess if I translate apprenticeship into almost the internship, one of the advantages I think that we have on that is that the internships provide an opportunity to see, for the student to see, yes, this is the kind of work and the job I want, and for the firm to say, yes, this is the person we want, to have those skills that you mentioned, yes, I want to learn and I can learn, and all the things that are needed. So it's almost like a try-buy type relationship, and I think it's actually worked very well. Evidence is that your hire rates are very high, then we know the connection is right. I think we see that with those types of things. We see it with the college internships over the summer. They want to come back or they want to try something else, and I think that, in my mind, is key, and it's going to be the future, I think.
So from working with Europe, we know that this is having an impact, and corporations are taking on these interns and great things are happening. But it's still at a small scale, and Europe is one organization, and even their amazing corporations or organizations in their network are taking a small amount of students. Like Linda, you say even you have 20 at this moment. How do we make this bigger? Like, what needs to shift for organizations to be thinking differently about inclusion?
To be clear, we're at 50.
Sorry, 50. Yeah.
I said 20, that's our teller program. On the other side, we have about 25 that are actually on technology and operations. So we started the relationship, I think, back in 2006, and we were at 5 to 10, and now we're at 50. Yes, it's been 6 years, but it's grown, and we're trying to find those opportunities where there's a niche. So it's not the job here and a job there. It's really where, so that also helps organizations like Europe determine what the proper training needs to be. One of the things that we did with Europe back in 2010 was help them build the quality assurance testing training that they have for us here in New York. Then we know also that the students are going to come in with some more basic knowledge that maybe they didn't have before, and they are going to be more valuable employees. So I think to grow this type of relationship, and to scale it, a couple things. A, we have to make sure that the organizations are aligned with where the demand is. And then I also think that knowing what the demand's going to be and working with these organizations to ensure that their training is appropriate and matches what we're going to need. It is the hard question and the million-dollar question of what are we going to need? Well, who knows? But we got to try, and we got to start somewhere. So I think those are the types of things I think we think about with that.
I would just say, going back to, I think it's not just the education system that needs to tap in, but also the nonprofit sector. And Europe is right in the middle of that. But we need to educate the business community on what the nonprofit sector has the ability to do with their support and with foundation support, to be quite honest. Foundations need to step up also. But we've worked very closely with Hewlett-Packard and Burberry and LinkedIn and Zynga, and we're looking to partner with these organizations so they understand that there are the Europes of the world. We just brought on Citizen Schools to our portfolio that does great work in the traditional public school setting around mentoring. So we have amazing nonprofits that don't often have the ability to get in front of the people making the decisions at the JPMorgans of the world. So Tipping Point tries to be that broker here in the Bay Area. So we're doing our part. We have 40 organizations that we're supporting, and we have corporate support, and we also partner with government. I mean, government's got to play a strong role in this too. So Tipping Point's doing it here in the Bay Area.
And I would say, I know that you heard our founder, Gerald Chertavian, yesterday, and so don't repeat this to him, but I think the answer has nothing to do with Europe at the end of the day. I think it's incumbent upon us in this sector, and I certainly know from Daniel's perspective, he pushes his portfolio to be thinking about this, is how do you study what works, and how do you apply it on a grander scale? That's really what it boils down to. And I think about it in two different dimensions. One is changing perceptions of talent in our country. And if we think about the need for technical skills and the need for what we call MAP, motivation, adaptability, and perseverance, I mean, not to be overly dramatic, but urban issues are real and they're intense and they're difficult. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a student who's suffered violence in their family and holding someone who's died in their arms. It happens all the time. And so that builds up a reserve of perseverance that we need to tap into. And we find that at Year Up, and I think you at JPMorgan, we hear this. Two of our most recent interns here locally were named Employee of the Month as interns, because I think we need to be thinking about not liabilities, but assets. How do we take the experiences of our young adults? How do we tap into them appropriately, get them the right skills and the right opportunities, and watch them take off? I think that's an incredible piece of the puzzle. So the changing perceptions. And I think the second is that we need to educate better and more effectively. I know that Sal Khan will be coming on later and thinking about disrupting education, but we have to be much more nimble. We have to be more responsive. We have to be using online e-learning tools in a much better and a more effective way.
And Linda, from the experience of being on the ground, and we know there are a million challenges when you think about hiring differently or changing the way in which you recruit, what advice would you give to another organization on where they can start?
It's a good question. I think it really comes down to the relationships, and I think that's where you started the conversation is, we started with one relationship between Gerald and John Galante, who's one of our CIOs, and it just grew from there. Gerald obviously has the connection of Year Up, and John talked to the other CIOs and talked to operations. John had background in operations for our firm. And then it grew from there. We got our firm CIO involved, Guy Chirillo. And it really is all about relationships. It's about marketing. It's about success stories and telling those success stories. And we also brought in a couple other nonprofits where we actually tried to talk about job development and get the nonprofits talking to each other. So Perscolis and Empower, we got together with Year Up in New York to see where the opportunities, so that they're more complementing each other as opposed to competing for the same positions. There's enough room for everyone, and we wanted to make sure the direction was in the right place. So I think it really does come down to the relationships, in my opinion.
So one last question for each of you. We have amazing people sitting in this audience who represent organizations and social enterprises and nonprofits. What would your ask be of them around how we start to make this shift?
Well, I can start. I have lots of thoughts about this. I think that one of them is galvanizing support. If the common thread of the talent gap that exists in our country, people, if you say that, people will nod their head vigorously. Yes, I experience it. Yes, I have a hard time hiring across the board. So how do we find the common voice around that? And I think what's interesting is that the conversations I have with a JPMorgan or firms in the Valley is that this is not a competitive issue. We'll sit at the table and talk about this together because we know as in the Valley, we will benefit from a higher level of our workforce. So how is it that we galvanize that interest, and how do we then start to talk about what are the responsibilities of the private sector in terms of engaging our educational system in our young adults, participating in internships and apprenticeship programs, and then also feeding information efficiently into our educational system, and then getting educators and elected officials, nonprofit leaders to come to the table and say, this is, that's a fair deal, what are we going to do in return? That kind of bargain, grand bargain, I think is something that would move the needle quite a bit.
I have to raise money a lot. So if there are funders in the room, what I would say is if there are foundations here, if there are people that like to invest in amazing entrepreneurs, and if you're an entrepreneur, you'll appreciate this. When we started with Jay, we didn't get behind him to fund a select group of kids. We got behind him because he's an amazing leader. We need foundations and donors to allow these entrepreneurs and these leaders to unleash their potential. And so what we do at Tipping Point is really push on general operating support to allow the Year Ups of the world to do what they do best. And that is also something that is just not spoken about in the foundation world. It's we want to pay just for this program. We have to pay to unleash the abilities of leaders like Jay. And so that's my plug going out.
I would agree. I think, we look at it from a two-pronged approach. One is the foundation, and I believe we just approved a $250,000 grant for Europe for Silicon, to open up your Silicon Valley office, because we recognize that's where a lot of our demand is going to start to come from a technology organization perspective. So the grants are very important and should continue, so I echo that. And I think the second is, we as a firm should put skin in the game, and that's really, I think, the reflection of the internship program that we have. So how can we grow that? We had faith, and we are successful with Europe, and we should just continue that, but make sure that we look at this from a win-win perspective. So the organization Europe wins, JPMorgan wins because we have another talent pool, and we move forward.
I just want to say thank you, actually, because as Linda mentioned, we'll be opening our Silicon Valley office in March of 2013, and it's largely responsible for the two groups here, Tipping Point and JPMorgan, for their leadership gifts. So I want to say thank you for that.
Well, on that, I want to say thank you to our three panelists today for starting off this conversation, and hopefully we are just at the beginning of some big change. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.